You're watching the Eternal Tournament Series.
Hello and welcome everyone to week 6 of the Eternal Tournament Series. I am, of course, your host, Bairdrus, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host today, LocoPojo.
Welcome, guys. We're into game 1 of the match with Maybe Next Time on Chalice Control versus Juaspas' FTS Hour. And we're going to be getting to that in just a second here.
Yeah, it's going to be a really exciting matchup. We got a great tournament for you all today. We got 39 participants, another 6-rounder. Just so everybody knows, the Invitational is coming up on the 24th and 25th of June. So we only have one more weekly after this one. The last chance qualifier is going to be next Sunday as well. So the top 4 people from that will also be guaranteed a spot in the Invitational. And the week after that, we're going to have our 32-man Invitational with a nice little prize pool set up. So you all should either make sure that you can get in your qualification or definitely make sure to come check it out. For the time being, though.
Good time.
Yeah, it definitely will be a good time. For the time being, though, let's check out this matchup. We got Juaspas, who is on FTS Hour. This is one of my favorite decks, and in fact, I'm pretty sure Juaspas is one of the people who's played this deck multiple times. It's essentially Witching Hour plus Scrap Tank with time.
That's a pretty good combination. Assembly Line and Torrent of Spiders are really good at making multiple units to trigger the Witching Hour. The big deal here is that you have that 24 cost spell that reduces with every card that you play, but that includes cards that are made by other cards, like Torrent of Spiders and Assembly Line, Marison's Disciples little tokens, and Grenadin Drone. All of those count for extra cards towards the Witching Hour, which gives you a pretty decent mid-range blowout at the near the late game. And there's a lot of strength in that Praxis archetype anyways.
Yeah, there really is, though. A lot of strength in the Praxis archetype. It can do quite a number of things. We have seen Juaspas pilot the deck to a great bit of success. On the other side of the table, we have Maybe Next Time on Chalice Control. Now, Chalice Control is a deck I'm sure you're very familiar with, LocoPojo. It's definitely been making the rounds, not only in the tournament scene, but also on the ladder as of late.
Yeah, Chalice Control is a fairly strong control archetype, uses 4 crystalline chalices with another batch of small little token type units. So we got tokens versus tokens here. The basic idea behind it is you get this level of extra card advantage out of every single card that you play onto Crystalline Chalice, and then that also turns all of your little units into big beefy dudes that will eventually sort of dominate the mid-range and deal with all of the stuff in the late game that you need. You also run Channel the Tempest for finishers and keep the board clear whenever you need to if you get into trouble.
Yeah, by far one of the most impressive things for me watching the Chalice Control deck is just the level of inevitability and sustainability that the deck can create by itself. With cards like Channel the Tempest and Crystalline Chalice, as well as the token setup, you really do have this great ability to just cycle through your deck and find all the pieces to your combo you need. And really, as soon as you get your first Crystalline Chalice online, every little token or little dude you pick up ends up being very useful. I mean, turning them into not only bigger units, but also cycling and drawing a card just makes Crystalline Chalice such an invaluable card in a deck setup like this. And it allows you to cycle through most of your deck, accompanied by a few other draw spells as well. But it's certainly a very powerful archetype.
Yeah, it's very good at securing the late game, and it's also pretty decent at keeping alive in the early game against some of the smaller stuff. I think that the deck may be a little weaker than it's anticipated, but so the deck can be a little bit weaker than you'd expect it to be, but it does spend a long time winning, so it often feels good to play on ladder. I think it's very strong in a tournament setup, however, just because it's such a commanding control deck with so much different levels of advantage and such flexibility against different types of decks.
Yeah, very true. The deck does have a lot of flexibility, especially with that sideboard. But we are jumping into game 1 here. Unfortunately, I think we lost Juaspas' hand cam, but we do see Maybe Next Time with looking a little bit power starved. Going to need to find some time here, and especially double time to make sure that he can cast this Temple Scribe at some point here in this game.
Yep, Temple Scribe is a pretty relevant card for maybe. He's got the ability to cast Combre Healer here, which will save him against some of the early tokens. But the main issue is going to be whether or not Juaspas can get enough damage in to really start some pressure. With the Chalice decks, you kind of want to race them down a little bit and see if you can get going before their engine basically ensures that inevitability that they're so very fond of.
Yeah, and we are seeing maybe next time hitting a very, very nice series of power drops. While they are coming in depleted, he at least has amassed all of his influence that he's going to need for the whole deck. So his whole deck's online. And another thing about the Chalice Control deck is it is a very, very cheap deck outside of Channel of Tempest. Channel of Tempest is really your upper end, but outside of that, you play maybe a Harsh Rule or two, and then you also would play about 3 copies, I think, of Lumen Defender, maybe next time deck, and that's it. Everything else is cheaper than 4.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty strong matchup for maybe here on account of the fact that all of these tokens are very good at blocking other tokens, and a lot of Juaspas's deck's strengths are in those single target removal spells like Combust, where you can basically just pick off anything you want unconditionally. Unfortunately, there's not really any good targets, so maybe has a pretty good chance of stabilizing the game early and then spiraling it out of control late.
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely can get to that point. I imagine we'll see a Chalice coming down this turn and just setting himself up for his future turns. We do indeed see that. And we'll see as we move into the later parts of the game. I mean, if Juaspas actually hits his power, which it doesn't look like he's been able to do, I mean, there's always the chance that Juaspas has some very, very high late game as well. Like, he does have a lot of end game in his deck as well, between Witching Hours and Scrap Tanks, Obelisks, Sandstorm Titans. He does have quite a few things going on for himself, but he definitely has to get to that point. If he's going to be stuck on 3 power all game, I don't think he's ever going to make it there.
Yeah, we know from the peek at hand cam that Duaspas does in fact have scrap tanks in his opening hand. As to what he's picked up and what's going to help him out, it seems like there's not a lot here that's working out well. And you do need to get pretty consistent power to get the Witching Hour deck going. Not only do you actually want to be at 7 or 8 so you can cast it a turn earlier, but it's also pretty relevant for basically just casting all of the other stuff that allows you to make Witching Hour cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jospas finally hits one of his important cards here. Now that he's got a Xena and Obelisk in play, maybe next time he's going to need to start loading the board up with different tokens to be able to block his opponent off.
Obelisk is really, really strong here. Chalice gives you card advantage, but Obelisk gives you board advantage, which is what Waspas really needs to start pushing through and get the damage in before those channels come online.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do see him hit 5 powers, so Scrap Tank can come online, but Vault of the Praxis instead of Juaspas. Now, this gives him some of his own inevitability. Once you get a Vault of the Praxis in play as the FTS Witching Hour deck, you can start to drop a ton of tokens on the board and also cycle them into cards, as we're going to see right here. Grenadin Drone drawing a card and making 2/2/2 units. As very, very strong for 1 power.
Juaspas being super aggressive here, attacking with the Ephemeral Wisps, even though they're decent defenders against the 4/3s and the 3/3s. Maybe next time has Lumen Defender, which is definitely the kind of card you want against token aggro. And he's choosing to attack here, which is a good way to push damage, but also leaves him more vulnerable to attacks from Juaspas.
Yeah, it absolutely does, and this is kind of going to become a back and forth race here. I'm curious to see if Juaspas is finally going to drop Scrap Tank. Doesn't seem like he's going to. If he's holding on to Scrap Tank, I'd definitely like to see it come down. It's going to allow him to force through a lot of damage every turn. Your opponent not going to be very eager to trade off with your units. Now, we do see maybe next time has a Vanquish in hand, or a pair of Vanquishes, as it were, as well as 2 Harsh Rules. I'm curious to see if those Harsh Rules are ever going to be fired off in this game, or if they're going to just kind of sit in the hand for the majority, as maybe next time really hasn't lost the board yet. Juaspas definitely has a lot of units down on it, but maybe next time has some very bulky units on his side, including that 3/7 Lumen Defender that's going to start stalling Juaspas out.
Yeah, with next time's deck, it looks like those the Locusts are probably the best option that he has for pushing damage, but with Channel the Tempest going straight at face, maybe is actually going to be able to push a decent amount of damage onto Juaspas. He's not going to have this sort of slow aggressive match or slow match against aggression. He's looking for the win, and he's looking for it quick.
Yeah, absolutely. He is pressuring his opponent as fast as he possibly can, which is good, as Juaspas's FTS Witching Hour deck likes to do the exact same thing. He will try and pressure his opponent out as quickly as possible. I mean, if the Lumen Defender hadn't come down on time, we'd likely have to see a Harsh Rule being dropped on this board, as Juaspas has started to expand this board and make it quite threatening. That being said, Juaspas is actually just going to take some blocks here. And maybe next time, happy to let the Lumen Defender get in for 3 and trade off some of the other tokens. He does have the Harsh Rule as the backup plan, so if Juaspas decides to commit a ton to the board this turn, maybe next time can always swing in with the Lumen Defender and pull the trigger and blow it all up.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation here. These Chalice decks are really, really good if they can get you down to around 10 or 12, because that means that once they draw their Channel the Tempest, that's just the game. And a lot of people sort of underestimate the ability of those tokens to get that kind of little bit of whittle damage down. If you can keep the tokens occupied, then you usually don't run into as many problems with the Channel the Tempest. But right now, it's looking like Juaspas is just looking for good answers, and he found a pretty decent one in Torrent of Spiders.
Yeah, he did find a Torrent of Spiders, and Torrent of Spiders is a very, very nice card in this matchup, not only because it provides so many bodies, but because it provides so many bodies on such cheap card. With it only costing Juaspas 1 card to play this, now maybe next time is in a situation where he likely is going to have to Harsh Rule this turn, but this isn't the type of setup he was looking to play Harsh Rule into. He was hoping to catch maybe 1, 2, possibly even 3 cards out of Juaspas, but Juaspas essentially only played a single card and was still able to cycle it with the Vault of the Praxis here. So this almost gives a slight edge to Juaspas here. We'll see as maybe next time plays a Marison's Disciple, if Juaspas has some way to counter this Locust in the air that's going to start picking him down.
Yeah, keep in mind, Maybe's particular version of the Chalice control deck is only running 2 channels, so the inevitability isn't actually there unless he manages to draw that one finisher. Juaspas can do the same thing that Maybe was trying to do early in the game. He can keep him occupied with lots and lots of small tokens. He can keep his own inevitability engine, which is Vault of the Praxis, running, and oh, there comes the first Witching Hour. That's a pretty solid opener.
Yeah, that's a very solid opener. Finally got a Witching Hour to drop down. And this is kind of a similar situation to what I was just saying about Torrent of Spiders, is that maybe next time has the answer here in the Harsh Rule, and he almost has to play it here. I don't think he has any way around it. But he's essentially trading 1 card for 1 card, except it's even better for Juaspas because it's 1 card that he already cycled. Witching Hour is a lot more powerful than Torrent of Spiders, but at the end of the day, Juaspas still cycled it for another card. It's still, possible that he picks up either another Torrent of Spiders, another Witching Hour, and at the end of the day, it forced a whole Harsh Rule out of maybe next time, which brings him down to, I think, 1 Harsh Rule left in the whole deck. That could have also been it, too. I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to check the deck list, so this brings maybe next time's answers down very low.
At this point, Juaspas can, if he plays another Witching Hour, maybe next time is very close to dead, and it looks like there is a second Witching Hour. He's activated Obelisk, so all of those tokens are 8/8s, and at this point, maybe he's in a lot of trouble. He basically needs to Wisdom into a Channel the Tempest. That might be lethal, but with Devour on the Ephemeral Wisp, that actually puts him above any potential Channel lethal.
Yeah, and Juaspas has a 3rd Xenon Obelisk, so this makes it even more difficult. That being said, with the Scorpion Wasp pickup, maybe next time can actually answer 3 of these Horsemen right here. He can answer the Flying one with the Scorpion Wasp, and then he can answer the Deadly and the Lifesteal one with the Vanquishes, which puts him in an okay position.
Yeah, it's a decent amount of stall. Every card that he loses here is a card off of Channel the Tempest lethal, so that's something that he has to consider, but at this point, he doesn't really have any options. He has to go for the kill all of the 10/10s plan.
Yeah, and it's not the plan he really wants to be taking, but it's the one he has to take here. So maybe next time he's going to be looking for important cards like Vanquish, his 3rd Harsh Rule if he can find it, more Scorpion Wasp, Lumen Defender, any units that can actually trade with these bulky units, because now every single card Juaspas plays is going to be have 6/6 added to it with 3 Xenon Obelisks in play.
Yep. And 2 10-10 swing in for lethal. The Scorpion Wasp will block one of them, but maybe did not have the power to play out Desert Marshal as a second blocker, so he's going to take a beating here. From here, Juaspas can run out pretty much anything he wants. If he gets Scrap Tank or anything into play, that'll give him another draw. Ephemeral Wisp and Power will just get him more draws as well. He's playing very carefully around Harsh Rule, and I think that overall that's just perfectly fine. Like, he only needs like 2 or 3 units to dominate the board. But he has 5.
Yeah, he does overextend into Harsh Rule a little bit there, but if you're willing to play around the Harsh Rule in this case, it's possible that your opponent can stall you out here and give himself extra draw steps. That being said, I think we're in a situation where even if maybe next time finds the Harsh Rule, I honestly don't think it's going to be enough. I think Juaspas has so much cycle at this point that he's essentially just in the clear.
Yeah, Great Parliament gives him not enough blockers to actually save him. He could play Combre Healer here, gain 3 health, and then at that point he still doesn't have quite enough. He needs to be able to block enough units that he can attack in with the Owls and get a Channel the Tempest next turn. That's his only out. And from here, it doesn't look like he has it.
No, I think he's going to have to sacrifice off all of his units, and that's before Juaspas drops any blockers on the return. So, from my point of view here, without being able to see Juaspas's hand, I'm pretty positive that he's able to lock this game up. We're going to see maybe next time have to trade off essentially his entire board. And wow, Juaspas dropping another Witching Hour, third Witching Hour of the game. He's going to be able to take down one of the Owls, and this should ensure lethal is coming across this turn.
You've heard the tales. It's the 12 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and it looks like it has arrived for maybe next time. So that's game 1, and we'll be going into game 2 very shortly after sideboards.
Yeah, we'll have to try and take a look at the deck list for sideboarding. I don't think we're going to have a hand cam on any of these. That was very, very exciting, though. That was fantastic. I mean, I love this FDS Witching Hour deck. It's probably my favorite deck still in the format. And I like seeing Witching Hour get cast, so getting to see cast in one game is always a lot of fun. Taking a look at these players' sideboards, though, Juaspas has 4 Sabotages, 2 Annihilates, 2 Decays, 3 Scorpion Wasps, and 4 Sandstorm Titans here.
Yeah, of those, it's going to be hard to say exactly what wants to come in. For the most part, Juaspas doesn't need a lot of things. The Sabotages are pretty good includes if you want to take the Channel the Tempests and Crystalline Chalices out of your opponent's hand. Mostly, though, Juaspas wants to be clogging up the board and sort of working on that inevitability engine of his own. I think Sabotage is probably the most likely thing to side in. Decay is also pretty good against Chalice, but there aren't really that many other relics in the Chalice deck, and I'm not sure that Juaspas really cares as much about the Chalice draw as much as he does about just basically controlling and blocking all of those units. So it'll be hard to say.
Yeah, it is hard to say. I have to imagine that maybe 1 copy of Decay will come in, but it's hard to say if 2 copies will come in. I also agree with Sabotages coming in. They're really, really a great card in this matchup. As we saw, maybe next time had plenty of cards he'd like to get his hands on. Vanquish, Chalice, Channel of the Tempest, and Harsh Rule. That's the 4th one. As well as Great Parliament. Lots of cards he can get rid of.
Yeah,
So.
it can be hard for Juaspas to actually cycle cards out of his deck. Combusts are the obvious targets, since the only thing that they're really hitting is the Lumen Defender and anything that's been buffed by Chalice. But most of the cards in Juaspas's deck mean extra draws with Vault of the Praxis and have a significant amount of extra value against slow control decks just for their ability to hold the line. So he has to be careful not to sacrifice too much board advantage, but I think we will see some Sabotages and Decays coming in.
Yeah, I have a feeling we're going to see them coming in as well. On maybe next time's side, this Chalice control deck, we have a lot of interesting cards in his sideboard. I mean, he is playing a deck with Primal, and Primal, as most people know, has one of the best sideboarding plans. He's got 1 Permafrost, 3 Backlashes, 2 Lightning Storms, 3 Lightning Strikes, 2 Decays, 1 Great Parliament, a single Lumen Defender, and 2 more Channel of Tempest. So the cards that immediately stick out to me here in this matchup are going to be Lightning Storm as well as Decay. Those are, I think, going to be the 2 most key cards for maybe next time.
Yeah, Lightning Storm and Decay are both super relevant. The FTJ or FTS deck is really, really like it's very reliant upon those 8 relics. The basic card advantage and inevitability that Vault of the Praxis provides, and the just absolute value that Xenon Obelisk provides with all of your tokens. If you can get enough of those decayed and destroyed, then you can actually seize control of the game pretty easily with your own chalices. Channel the Tempest is pretty solid for increasing that inevitability. We saw that it was pretty lacking. Maybe next time doesn't have the ability to get through with tokens as you normally would with a Chalice control deck. There's just too much stuff gumming up the ground and allowing easy trades for Juaspas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are just so many little units that it makes it so the Chalice control deck really can't enact its game plan of making a large board, because by the time it can establish a large board, Juaspas has likely already made a large board of its own. Since he is playing the more of a traditional token style deck, it's a lot easier for him to gum up the board, as you said, than it would be for the Chalice control deck, which means maybe next time is going to need some way to finish out this game. So the extra 2 Channel the Tempest from the sideboard, I actually do like coming in a lot here. At any point, there was certainly about a 3 or 4 turn window where if maybe next time had been able to pull off another Channel the Tempest, he would have been able to close out that game. So if he had had 4 in the main board from the start, that first game could have ended very, very differently.
Yep. And there's always the opportunity to run Backlash here. You do have one spell in particular that I think you really, really want to counter.
Yeah, Witching Hour is a fantastic target to hit with Backlash. I mean, absolutely will just destroy your opponent. And if you can't hit Witching Hour, there is always cards like Torrent of Spiders, Assembly Line, Quarry, Devour, and Combust. So there is plenty of cards that you can hit.
Yep.
I think we have started our second game, though, so let's jump into it. Maybe next time he has kept this hand, which is very, very power light.
Yeah, those 2 power hands are really, really tricky in control. Oh, no, but it looks like it is coming back. We see 3 power here and 2 chalices. So he is going to be able to play out that Temple Scribe pretty early and get that into a chalice and maybe start spiraling the game if Juaspas can't pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we see players just leading off with depleted powers back and forth. Maybe next time is likely going to be behind Juaspas here, but it also depends on what Juaspas can play in the early turns. Let's see what he manages to come up with. He does play a Sabotage here. Now, this is an interesting set of targets here. Yeah, okay. Wisdom of the Elders, I think, makes a lot of sense here. Ooh, he has a second Sabotage, and he does take a Chalice with the Sabotage. That's interesting. I almost would consider taking Harsh Rule, but it depends on the context of his hand.
Yeah, if he can deal easily with the large units off of Chalice, then I think it's reasonable to just sort of set up in that fashion. He could be running a Decay as well and just have like all of his sideboard cards in his hand. There are some ways in which this could go okay for him, but we'll see exactly what ends up happening.
Yeah, certainly. Juaspas not playing anything in the first 3 or 4 turns is not a great way for him to start, but we'll see if he has any of his relics to lead off with in the next turn. On the other side, though, maybe next time has started to establish a pretty solid board here. I mean, he's already got 5 power down, likely going to be able to put at least 1 or 2 more down for the next turn, which does put Juaspas on a very real clock.
Yeah, I think that Juaspas was right to keep a hand where he doesn't have anything early, just because it's so relevant to actually get the value off of his Xenon Obelisk. He needs to actually have the inevitability engine to win the game, because neither of these decks are capable of putting down a tremendous amount of pressure. That being said, he still hasn't played down a unit, and he's now starting to take around like 4 or 5 damage a turn, which is not really where you want to be. He does need to find something else to play this turn.
Yeah, and with the extra added power for maybe next time, now it's 8 damage a turn. So Juaspas down to a 3-turn clock, and he still hasn't found a single unit to play. And with the Backlash picked up by maybe next time, that means it's going to have to be a unit here. Maybe next time we'll be able to counter off any spell that's played. So Juaspas going to need to find something big here to make sure he doesn't just die. He is already down to 9 health.
Yeah, Grenadin Drone matches 2/2/2s, but maybe next time actually throwing the Scorpion Wasp out just to push more damage seems like a pretty relevant endeavor. And picking up a Decay for the Obelisk is really bad news. He can Decay now as a trick if Waspas chooses to block the 2/2/2s, but apparently Waspas reads that. He blocks the 1/1s, which does get him value even with the Decay destroyed.
Yeah, very interesting here. And we are going to see, oh, interesting, a Devour as well. I like the Devour here since you already blocked with the damage. Juaspas recognizes he has to draw cards to put himself in a situation where he can win this game. That being said, he did just take a 7 damage there. And 7 damage is quite a lot when you're already sitting on 11. So Juaspas is almost dead to just the units in the air.
I'm a little surprised that maybe next time let that Devour go past. Not only was it 2 cards for Waspas, which gives him the potential to draw real outs, but also like he just was able to get 2 health off of that, which puts him above lethal in the air. I think maybe that backlash would have been a good idea, but it's possible that he doesn't feel confident that he can actually sabotage plus backlash for lethal.
Yeah, wow, yeah. Sabotage into Backlash, that's actually going to take care of Juaspas. You know, I always forget the 2 damage off of Backlash because often it's so irrelevant. But in that case, it does actually lock the game up for maybe next time. So taking him to a swift victory. And we can already start to see how the Chalice control deck does get better after sideboard. Although that game is not necessarily indicative of the whole matchup. It is unfortunate when Juaspas can't play any units down until turn 7.
Yeah, I think there is an inherent weakness to running 4 sabotages in your deck if you're not a fully aggressive style, because like you do have a lot of useful targets that you can hit with sabotage, sure, but also like basically you're sacrificing board presence and tempo in order to get that thing down, and if it alters the structure of your deck so much that you can't play units anymore, that really does lead to a couple of surprising game losses. Not a huge percentage, but enough to affect the outcome of a tournament.
Yeah, it absolutely does. And we do see players into our game 3, our deciding game right here, leading off with some power. Maybe next time's hand, he has the Decay, he has the Crystalline Chalice, he's got the Amber Acolyte to fish up more power, 2 Amber Acolytes now. I mean, this is the hand he's often looking for,
Yeah,
certainly with the Decay.
it looks pretty perfect. Basically, Decay is the key card for maybe next time. As long as he picks up Decays, he should be fine for everything up to the point where Witching Hour is played, at which point he will probably have a harsh rule somewhere in his deck. So, like, just being able to disable as many of Dwaspas's relics as possible is all that maybe needs to spiral the game out of control with his own stuff. Lumen Defender is just a decent match even without his relics. He's got lots of ways to stall tokens. He's not worried about the late game at all. Even if some of his better cards get sabotaged, he'll just draw more.
Yeah, absolutely. Sabotage being fired off here, though, this is going to give Juaspas a chance to take off whichever he considers most important. And it looks like he does go for the Crystalline Chalice instead of the Decay, leaning towards Juaspas either holding no relics in his hand or multiple relics in his hand. We'll have to see as they come down. But the fact that the Crystalline Chalice is gone is pretty relevant for maybe next time. It does take away his generation engine. He's not going to be able to draw anymore now, and he's going to be relying on the top of his deck. Whereas if Juaspas can find a Vault of the Praxis, he'll be able to cycle very, very easily.
Keep in mind, it's pretty likely that the Combusts are still in his deck, so these cards like Combra Healer and Lumen Defender are fairly significant roadblocks. Waspas is pushing for damage, but I'm not actually sure how he's going to get the lethal that he's looking for.
I'm not entirely sure myself, unless Juaspas has something up his sleeve, but I can't imagine what that would be in this situation. If he was going to drop something like a Xenon Obelisk, he would obviously have to do it pre-combat. So it looks like he's just willing to sacrifice a few tokens. I guess he's got the assembly line to follow it up, so he's made plenty of tokens onto the board. That being said, with the cards that maybe next time has in his hand, it's very likely he's actually going to be able to stall this game back out. I mean, Lumen Defender's such a huge hit in this matchup.
Yeah, Waspas playing 2 Ephemeral Wisps out. He's got all the tokens he needs. it looks like for the most part, this board's going to be stalled out. So I think that the aggression doesn't really do a lot for him. There's a case where Juaspas can use Xenon Obelisk as a pseudo rally in any situation where he knows that there's no power up for decay, but that situation is rapidly deteriorating, and it's going to be hard for him to find exactly what he needs.
So Scrap Tank is one of the interesting cards in this matchup that can start to change how this matchup is played ever so slightly. This is going to allow him to make a very big Scrap Tank. Unfortunately, with a Lumen Defender on the board in a second one and maybe next time's hand, it's not like the Scrap Tank is going to be going anywhere very quickly. Juaspas is going to need to find a way around it with the Scrap Tank. That being said, it does make him just suiciding all these tokens in. It makes it a little more valuable than it otherwise would be.
Yeah, it's not a bad deal. The Channel the Tempest is now actually not in range to kill Scrap Tank, so Juaspas does have a unit that could potentially end the game. The only problem is he needs to get it through two very large meat walls, and there aren't that many control elements in Juaspas's deck. Like, he can play Torrent of Spiders and attack with those tokens to clear some stuff out. Xenon Obelisk's not a bad hit, but I don't know if it helps him a lot here, and of course the Decay can come out.
Yeah, and we very likely will see Decay coming out of maybe next time. Curious that he didn't actually play it there at his opponent's end of turn. Instead, he's just choosing to take it very slow. It's interesting because he could try and essentially catch his opponent out with it for an attack like this, although Juaspas did sabotage his hand earlier and see the Decay hanging out, so it shouldn't come as any surprise to him if he remembers the cards he saw earlier.
Yep. So this play doesn't look amazing. There's a decent amount of attack damage going through. I feel like you almost want to hold your Ephemeral Wisps back just to keep yourself out of channel lethal range. But he gets a little bit of damage in, pushes to 26. He's now in a much worse board state, and the Decay still hasn't come out. I think maybe might be saving it for a Vault of the Praxis, or waiting to see if in some way, like, at the moment, Obelisk isn't really a threat to him, so he can just sort of hang out and just be okay with that.
This is very true. I mean, the Obelisk isn't doing a lot until he hits at least 8 power, which is 2 turns away, and even then he's really going to need multiple Obelisks or some large units such as the Witching Hour itself to get him there. If Juaspas fishes out a Shadow here, which he very likely will, it's possible, based on what's been played, that he would be able to establish Witching Hour on this turn. Interesting that he grabbed a Time Sigil, though.
That would be a strong indication that he doesn't have Witching Hour, or that he's at least trying to bluff that he doesn't have Witching Hour. Maybe next time, sitting on 2 backlashes, he can take this very patiently. All he needs to do is just continue to attack with his tokens, keep the board as just slow as possible, and then as he doesn't even need to cast Channel the Tempest, as long as he can leave the backlashes up for Witching Hour.
Yeah, backlashing Witching Hour is going to put Juaspas in such a nasty situation, as well as maybe next time still has this Decay hanging out. He even has a harsh rule if by some miracle Juaspas was able to establish a large enough board to really start threatening maybe next time. He does have a harsh rule to just go ahead and clean it up. And, I mean, really, when you look at what is in maybe next time's hand, it's hard to imagine what Juaspas can be sitting over there on 3 cards that's actually going to challenge maybe next time or put him in a position where he doesn't have the right answer. Because from what I'm looking at, it looks like he has the right answer to every situation.
Yep, the Decay is pretty strong. He does throw it at the Xenon Obelisk, which means that he can continue to attack in. Juaspas played the 3/3 in order to stay defensive, but he's going to get slowly whittled down by these tokens now, and that's something that he's going to have to deal with eventually.
Yeah, and he really doesn't have a way to deal with it immediately. I mean, he can double block one of the tokens right now, and next turn he can triple block one of them, and that's okay, I suppose, but it's really not fantastic.
Yeah, I think this is pretty smart play, just trying to keep the damage pretty low. As long as Juaspas can establish even 1 card of value. And he did have the Vault of the Praxis. He was baiting the whole time looking for it. The assembly line backlash hurts a little bit, but that's 1 less potential backlash on the Witching Hour. So it's pretty likely that the last card in his hand is Witching Hour. He's getting the draws now off of his Ephemeral Wisps, and he's now got his Inevitability engine going again. But Desert Marshal silencing both Wisps means that Juaspas is now in a bit of trouble from the more aggressive side of this deck.
Yeah, and we are going to see maybe next time just go with an A space here to try and push through as much damage as possible. I mean, both the Ephemeral Wisps are silenced. They're very likely going to have to become chump blockers, but no matter how you look at it this turn, he's taking a bunch of damage.
It's a constant cycle of who's the beatdown. Basically, maybe it doesn't have his big inevitability engine, so he can't afford to sit back and wait. Juaspas probably should have been playing defensively for most of this game, and now that he has less stuff to deal with, it's going to be pretty tricky for him to find that extra bit of health. He doesn't have the Lumen defenders that maybe has to secure the board. Torrent of Spiders, however, will definitely be a strong, strong way to set things up.
Well, it would be if maybe next time doesn't backlash here. I have to imagine if you're sitting in maybe next time's position, this is one of those cards that you absolutely have to backlash. Like, there is definitely some consideration to holding it up for a card like Witching Hour, but Torrent of Spiders is essentially going to give your opponent a board reset, and I don't think without holding a Chalice yourself, you can allow yourself to be in that kind of a position.
Yeah, that does put Juaspas within lethal range. If he can cast the Witching Hour, he's okay, but I think that he's probably dead here.
Yeah, I think he is as well. If he has a Scorpion Wasp, I think he could have survived it too. But yeah, unfortunately, it has nothing else to play with it. And we do see maybe next time picking the series up 2-1 with Chalice Control over FTS Witching Hour.
Showing, I think that overall, like just that overall aggression from maybe next time deck, he chose his moments well and actually recognized when he was the beatdown deck. Really went for the opportunities that he needed to get the game secured. And while Juaspas's deck may have actually had more inevitability than Chalice Control, there were some situations where I think he overextended a little bit and ended up losing the game because of it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think he also sacrificed off too many of his tokens early instead of just holding them back. He was trying to push through little bits of damage that didn't end up mattering. And mainly, it comes down to the fact that maybe next time is playing a deck that has a lot of life gain in it through cards like Lumen Defender, as well as the Combri Healers. I mean, in that game alone, I believe 3 Lumen Defenders were played and 3 Combri Healers. So that amounts to 24 extra health that maybe next time was able to gain, which means that all that little damage that Juaspas was trying to push early really had absolutely zero relevance. And the tokens would have been much, much better in that in-game situation.
Yeah, like maybe next time's deck can blow up the board, which is scary. It can use Channel the Tempest, which is pretty terrifying. Has some good flyers, but it can't generate 12 10-10s. And I think that overall there is just a lot more like control elements that Juaspas could have been playing for that would have gone pretty well for him. I do like, in particular, in that third game, how he used Xenon Obelisk to bait the decay and just waited until that was done to actually set up Vault of the Praxis. Unfortunately, it was a little too late in the game, and he ended up not being able to generate enough tokens to get the draws and get his engine going.
Yeah, definitely a good bait there, though. I have to agree. I mean, Vault of the Praxis in that matchup actually is often much, much more important, as Juaspas just needed a way to cycle cards there. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, it took way too long for the decay to come out. Maybe next time playing very patiently with it, recognizing that he didn't need to take it down right away. And by the time he was willing to take it down, he had already established such a dominance on the board that Juaspas wasn't able to take it back.
Yeah, overall, very solid play from both players. I'm pretty excited to see both of them advance in the tournament, and we'll see if Juaspas can take a couple of games back and get himself into the semifinals. He needs to win probably all 5 now.
Yeah, I certainly hope he can get himself back. I would love to see more of that FTS Witching Hour deck later on in the tournament. For the moment, though, folks, we are going to take a very short break while we get our next matchup queued up, as the round is already over. So stay tuned. Do not go anywhere. We will be back in just a few moments.
See you in a bit, folks.